I have no idea what's about, so...
Hey.
4, 3.
And okay, so yeah, welcome everyone to our nth, I don't know, I lost the count, MetaGen educational events, where we have like interesting talks about all sorts of cool technology and futuristic and scientific stuff. So this week we have Tholin, who kindly suggested to talk about something he is very passionate about, related to chip manufacturing and electronics, which he has been playing a lot with. So yeah, join me welcoming him. Rich.
Hi. Before I get started, I'm gonna give everybody the quick rundown of what we're doing today. First things first, I will introduce myself, and after that, I will, before we get into the meat of this presentation, I will give a short recap about the current situation of open source software and open source hardware. Then I'm gonna lay out why exactly we should care about this open source silicon thing. Talk about why exactly it is challenging in the first place, and also talk about an unexpected player in this thing, and also then talk about what exactly has happened. I called it the road to the first open source chips, because it really has been an adventure. And of course, I will also be showcasing some very notable projects that came out of this. And then of course also looking ahead at the future. So, who am I? My name is Tholin. I do a lot of stuff, but mainly I do VR chat vault creation. I mean, you're standing in one of my creations right now. If you're live here, help to make this place. I also do web development professionally, and a little bit of machine learning as well, but not as much anymore in the recent days. But I guess my true passion lies with embedded development and just generally anything that's very low level, which also involves hardware development. Right, so this is waiting for the slides to update. This is one of my current projects. I call it Avali EEG, and it's a all-in-one EEG device for measuring your brainwaves that you're supposed to be able to put on top of your VR headset. So kind of my own interests overlap as well. But really, what I really enjoy doing the most is building computers. So there on the left, you can see something I finished just a couple weeks ago. It's a small computer board using a Signetics 2650 8-bit microprocessor, has some memories and some I/O. On the right is me debugging a board that I built using just simple 74 series logic chips, also implementing a very basic microprocessor. And for the longest time, I tried to get closer and closer to understanding how computers work. I thought that this is basically the deepest you can get, is building something out of individual logic chips, right? Because there's no way I can just go up to a silicon fab and ask them to make chips for me. But maybe there is. So that's kind of my motivation. But let's talk about something that's probably a little bit more familiar to the people and audience here, and that is open source software. I'm pretty sure everybody here is familiar with it. Probably uses it every single day, even right now. And really, it's I don't know what's on my slides. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what makes open source software great, because I think it's important to look back at where we are right now to understand why exactly we should care about open source silicon. I'll get into that in a bit. So One of the most important aspects that's very important to me about open source software is how educational it is. I do believe that a lot of people who are sitting here right now have touched programming at least once, and it's only possible because of the massive ecosystem that exists around getting people to develop these open source softwares. All the free tools are available online. Which really just helps to breed innovation. To having this many people interested in software, thanks to the ecosystem, and in general just allowing people to just go on Google and be like, hey, how do I make a C program? And eventually you get like a whole generation of people that grew up to understand how software design works, which really leads to a lot of new ideas being brought in. It's very accessible, as I just described. Anybody can go on the internet and learn how it works. And it's a really nice community around it. I remember, I really think a lot of people wouldn't have gotten as far with their software development careers if it weren't for like Stack Overflow or something. And of course, one of the aspects that's important to me is this feeling of security that I get from using open source software, especially building stuff from source myself, knowing that there's really anything hiding in there that I don't want. You also constantly have like a massive group of people based on the open internet constantly looking at your software and making sure there's no bugs, no flaws. So let's talk about something that's a little bit new, which is open source hardware. Right, so similar to open source software, which is software that's available for free. Oh, well, at least with the source free online. Open source hardware is hardware where you can find all the design files and like schematics and stuff online. But instead of assembling it using like a C compiler or something, you assemble it using hardware. And really, it follows a similar design, similar principles to open source software, where it's about increasing accessibility to the kind of hardware development tools that people use in the industry. It's about educating people about hardware, about how to make things essentially, not just virtually but also physically. And it's still a growing thing. I think one of the things that is still kind of holding open source hardware back is that a lot of places don't really know how to commercialize it properly. But yeah, it's hold on, what's happening here? Okay, yeah, and of course, customization is also a big word in the open source hardware community. If you can get hardware schematics online, you can build it yourself. You can also modify it to your own liking. And of course, it's also great for the entire right to repair movement that's going on. If all the information about the hardware you had was freely available online, there wouldn't be as big of a debate around it. But yeah, let's see. Exactly. So here's some examples of projects related to open source hardware. So on the very left you have an Arduino. I think anybody here who does some electronic engineering as a hobby has used one of these before. So you have this tiny computer board that has a tiny microcontroller on it and some I/O, and you can very easily program it to do whatever you want electronically. And this is actually an open source project. You can get the schematics for it online. You can build one yourself if you want to. Just the limitation is the Arduino is trademarked, so you can't put that on any clones. So that's how they are commercializing it. On the top right, you have the logo for a open source schematic editor. So you kind of get this overlap between the open source software and open source hardware communities, because you do need software to design hardware, and so some people decided we need more open source tools for making that. On the bottom right, I have something very similar to one of my own projects. That is somebody wearing a open source brain-computer interface, which also has 3D printed parts on it, because not everything that's hardware needs to have electronics in it. There's also a big thing of sharing layouts for 3D printed parts. And not only that, but in recent years it's become easier to not just make your own hardware open source, but also make the hardware to make hardware open source. So you get open source 3D printer that themselves have 3D printed parts in their structure. And on the right is actually a full CNC machine that is also has all of its blueprints and schematics available online. So similar to open source software, where you get a lot of the development tools that you need as open source tools as well, like C compilers and libraries and such. You can now also build the hardware that you need to make hardware from open source projects, which is great. So, however, there's one thing that's kind of common between all of these things, right? And that is that you pretty much always need one of these right here. Yeah, there we go, one of these right here. Whether it is to actually program your microcontrollers, or actually lay out your designs. And in any case, you're also going to see a lot of these things in your open source hardware projects. Integrated circuits, they're great. You can take an entire massive circuit that's like WRF, many components, transistors, resistors, capacitors, whatever, and then crunch it down and make it fit in your hand in this nice package. All right, and they're very helpful to open source hardware enthusiasts because, as I said, you can build up really complex devices for really cheap using integrated circuits, right? My slides are not advancing. Okay, let's try again.
Is it the stream or your computer?
No, something's wrong with my computer. The slides will not advance. Okay, no, okay, it seems to fix itself. So you can take stuff that used to be an entire massive suitcase full of electronics. I choose this example very deliberately. It's the Apollo guidance computer, which is the very first computer that used integrated circuits in its construction, and it's still massive. And you can compress it into something really small, and you can get a single chip that has memory on board, and it has storage on board, and it's like 100 times the processing power, and you can put it in a single chip. It's great. That sounds like a power that be really, I think, really useful to harness for the open source community. Seems kind of ripe for that. But no, it doesn't sound too difficult. If I can go and get custom PCBs made or custom parts milled from some other place, why not just get custom chips made? Might be a little bit more expensive. Unfortunately, it's way more difficult than that. It's expensive. It's prohibitively expensive to make chips, and not just because of the actual manufacturing costs. It's because just getting the development kit, they call it process development kits, similar to software development kits, except instead of getting tools to build and simulate and debug software, you get tools to design, debug, and simulate hardware. But even just getting access to those is it costs a lot of money. It turns out that fabs, silicon fabs, like to license their development kits, often under very restrictive NDAs and very long-term contracts, and it can cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get access to these development kits. Yeah, and they make you sign these big contracts, and sometimes even have to guarantee that you are going to order something before you even get access to the development kit. So you can't share the PDK, and you can't share any projects made with it because you'd be breaking your NDA. It's kind of the opposite of what you want for open source projects. And even getting access, like low-end stuff, is expensive. If you give TSMC like $10,000 US right now, they will give you one of their PDKs. They will give you the 280 nanometer PDK from like the mid-90s. Obviously, nobody's going to do anything useful with that. And of course, going any higher than like ancient technology is pretty much impossible. Like, you'd have to be Intel or AMD to get access to that kind of tech at all. Like, on top of the millions, you probably got to pay for that. And really, that's kind of the entire basis that these silicon fabs operate on. They can only make money from just selling licenses to their process development kits, as long as they remain closed, and the entire techniques behind making microchips kind of remain this big secret. So this is a graph I'll see in a moment, that shows how the prices of developing new hardware, developing new chips, has gone up over time. It's the red line. I took this slide from Google, from one of Google's presentations, and you can see that it's basically an exponential line. So this is over time. If you look at the x-axis, that's years, and it's basically gone up exponentially until almost hitting, about to hit $100 million to make new hardware, and that's quite a substantial amount of money to pay for really anyone. And it's not like we haven't solved this problem before. If this is a picture of a printed circuit board that is in manufacturing somewhere, and really printed circuit boards are something that you can get. If I design a PCB in KiCad and I upload it to jlcpcb.com, I can get boards for $2 and 2 weeks of delivery time. It's fine. The reason they do that is because board houses, they call them for PCBs, have really adjusted to taking as many customers as they possibly can. It's kind of streamlined the process towards that end. I remember when I was 12 and just getting into electronics, not 12, 13 I think, and just reading some articles on the internet and about how getting PCBs made involved you to actually get the chemicals yourself and do it yourself. And now you can just go on JLC PCB and order PCBs for $2. So this isn't an impossible problem to overcome, and I'll explain in a bit why. Let's just go backwards. There we go. So, first of all, why should we care, right? What are the effects of not having open source silicon? Well, it's going backwards again. There we go. So, I think the biggest problem is that integrated circuits they're literal black boxes, right? You can't see inside them. You can't really just open them up and be like, oh, hey, here's how that works. It keeps wanting to go back to the PCB slide, and that's kind of a problem.
I don't know.
Right, so you kind of get the exact opposite of open source hardware. You get a complete lack of any education. Try going on Google. Well, I mean, now you'll probably get some proper results, but a couple of years ago, go on Google and look at how to learn how to make microchips, and you'll find absolutely nothing. And that's problematic, right? And I'll explain in a moment why that's problematic in a quite more different sense than you might imagine. And there's no way to really contribute to the industry as a hobbyist, or even as a university or startup company. There's no sharing of designs going on, right? There's no sharing of ideas, and there's no educating people about this technology. And ultimately, that is just the reason why innovation in the semiconductor tech likes to stall occasionally. Which is quite horrible to imagine. And of course, it's an issue that's just me personally, I find very close to my heart is the security flaws that are brought on by this. Oh, right. This is what happens if you open up one of Intel's latest CPUs and look inside. Try and tell me anything about how this works. Just not going to happen. Even if you do open up the black box, you're not going to really figure anything out. So one of my most favorite talks I've ever seen on the internet is this one. It's by a guy called Christopher Domas. And he figured out a privilege escalation attack on x86 processors that universally works on all CPUs manufactured between the early 2000s and sometime in 2013. And it's not it was a complicated attack. It was quite simple, logically speaking. And really, I feel like this is the kind of thing that you're kind of inviting when you make an entire economy based around security by obscurity. I'm of course not claiming that open source is the solution to all of our security problems, but I feel like this could have been prevented if sharing of this technology would have been not as prohibitive. So this is the part where a new challenger appears, because Google a couple years ago they're trying to make AI processors. So they want to make custom chips that do nothing but process neural network data, and you put them on these boards and you want to put them in data centers. And although I don't know this for sure, I presume they hit the exact same problems that I just talked about. They're basically being asked to pay even for them unreasonable amount of money just to get access to development kits and the fab. And they need quite a cutting-edge process for making these AI CPUs, I guess. And also, like, where are you gonna find people to actually build these? Right? Because if Google wants to hire new software engineers, that's easy. Like, so many people these days, like you could pull a random person off the street and ask them if they've ever written a program before, and there's a very high likelihood they'll say yes. That's just how important software development, how open software development has become nowadays. But not the same for like Silicon Dev. I mean, where are they going to find people to make these if it's just quite difficult for people to really enter the industry at all? And so Google decides that, they could do it like every other company and kind of start from scratch, or they could actually do something about it. And of course, that's what they did. So they started playing a little bit of a long game, and they decided to partner with a couple companies on this one. So the first one is efabless.com, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in a moment, but they are very important in this story. And Skywater Foundries, which is one of the few foundries in the US that still takes contracts from just like random companies. And let me start advancing again. Hold on. So there we go. What does Skywater Foundries do? Well, they have two processes available to you can get, 130 nanometers and 90 nanometers. 130 nanometers is about from the year like 2001, so it's a little bit older, but it's still mostly relevant. They also offer. Oh, am I advancing too fast? Yeah, they also offer mixed signal circuits, which is very, very important because that means you can integrate analog circuitry into your designs, which even on larger and older process nodes is still very, very useful. They offer radiation-tolerant chips, so you can get chips from them that can go into space. And cryo models, which is just chips that can function at extremely low temperatures down to 45 Kelvin, according to them. Oops. I see, but I accidentally clicked. There. And of course, that's only scratching the surface. There's many more companies that have since gotten involved in this whole ecosystem that I'm about to explain. Some important ones in there, like ARM, and you even got a few other foundries in there. So let's explain what eFabless does, because I think it's really quite interesting. So to really understand where they are, let's just read the header from their website, right? So it says, chip creation made simple. Chip Ignite provides you with a pre-built chip for integrating your custom design on an automated open-source design flow, making it easy and affordable. Only $9,750 per project. So they are offering you to make your own custom chips for their platform for only 10 grand. So, that was not supposed to appear all at once. That's going to be confusing. Whatever. So, eFabless is sort of an extension of this idea of a fabless company. A fabless company is one that just outsources their chip fabrication. For instance, Intel is not fabless. They have their own fabs. They built them all the way during the 14 nanometer days, and so they're not fabless. But if you were a company that's making SoCs and you just buy like the license to ARM and then ship that off to some foundry somewhere else and let them make the chips for you, that would be called a fabless company. But eFabless takes it a step further because they reach out to the fab for you. Because, as I said, dealing with fab still involves getting these NDAs and these contracts, often long-term contracts. But eFabless do that for you. They're the ones who hold the long-term contract with Skywater Foundries. And all you need is you pass them their design, they get it manufactured as part of their contract with eFabless and pass the finished chips back to you. In a sense, kind of streamlining the process. And really $10,000 for getting custom chips made is not that bad. Like, considering what I said earlier about some fabs charging that much just to get access to the development kit. So how are they doing that? Well, Google somehow got them to publish their process development kit. It's right on GitHub. It's the world's first open source silicon process development kit. It's at github.com/Google/Skywater PDK. You can actually download all the files right now. And of course, it has all the relevant documentation public as well. If you want to read through that, it's actually quite a lot. And so PDKs are very important for making silicon. As you can see, they contain all of the descriptions of all of the different types of standard cells you can make, all of the different ways they can make transistors, includes the layer stack. And it is basically a bunch of technical information that you need to even be able to start designing a chip that will work with that foundry, because every single silicon fab manufactures things slightly differently, or sometimes very differently, and so you kind of need this information to start designing chips for them. Of course, it also comes with a bunch of tools for validation and building a design and preparing it for the fab. And of course, the entire thing also includes a bunch of open source tools, so this would not be possible without help from the open source software community. For instance, they're leveraging existing FOSS tools. For instance, you have a tool called Yosis, which is a free and open source hardware description language synthesizer. It's like a compiler, except it takes hardware description language programs and turns them into hardware. They also have a custom collection of like open source tools, some of which they made themselves, called OpenLane, which is a whole complicated thing that takes hardware description language designs and compiles them directly into a manufacturable chip design. So you don't even need to really learn all of the specifics about how to use the PDK and how to make chips. You can just write some Verilog, throw it through the OpenLane flow, and get a manufacturable design out the other end. That's the point of it. I will be talking a lot more about that in part 2 of this. Oh no. Okay, yeah. Okay, there's also some simulation tools included, like iVerilog and for simulating in GTK Wave for reading the results. Also several analysis and layout tools. I will talk about that more during part 2 as well. Okay, yeah, so that can't be all though, right? Because making chips is still expensive, even on an older process. Like just the manufacturing costs are enormous. And so that's where an idea is borrowed from PCB manufacturing. Because when you order something from a PCB board house, they start off with these like massive plates of copper-coated fiberglass passing through the entire manufacturing process. But instead of just putting like a single board design on there, they put multiple people's board designs onto a single plate and then cut them apart and then sort them out. It turns out you can do that with silicon just fine. It's called a multi-project wafer. And this is a picture I found of one, although this is not from Skywater. They look very different. You can see it's a wafer with silicon chips on it, but they don't look all the same. There's at least like three different ones on there, and this is basically a multi-project wafer. So you have designs for multiple customers on there, and they cut that apart as you usually would, but then sort them out to the different customers. And so the idea of this is that it means that first of all, eFabless likes to call these shuttles. The technical term is multi-project wafer, but eFabless likes to call them shuttles for short. And they can fit up to 40 projects on one. So they get these multi-project wafers with 40 projects on each wafer. And of course, the advantage of this is that you're sharing the space, you're sharing the costs. Right? So instead of paying $500,000 for a single fab order, you only pay $10K because it's divided by 40. And it also leads to faster turnaround times than directly dealing with a fab, because that's kind of done for you already. But it doesn't mean you don't get as many chips. But if you're a university or a startup company, or you just want some early prototypes before you go into mass production, that's not really a big deal. Also, $10,000, it's like almost within the affordable range of like some rather more wealthy hobbyists. It's almost there, and in that sense, it really significantly lowers the bar of entry, and of course, so they decided to go one step further with this, because what Google really wants is for more people to enter this industry and kind of build a community around it. So they started doing free shuttles. Right? So every quarter, they do a shuttle. So 4 times a year, where all expenses are paid. Right? Basically, it's a 40-slot shuttle as before, but anybody on the whole internet can submit their project to it and get it made for free. This means the $10,000 for the manufacturing plus the shipping, plus the assembly, is all paid by Google, and you just get free silicon. The catch is that it's a lottery, because obviously free stuff means you will get more than 40 people wanting in on that. So it is a lottery between those that apply. The chances are, I don't know, it's just 25%. It's more like 40%. The last free shuttle had, I think, it had like 90 projects on 40 slots, so it's only slightly worse than like 50% chance. And of course, you can just resubmit, in which case they'll actually weigh your submission higher in the lottery. So it's actually very easy to get your free custom silicon made, even as a hobbyist now. And of course, that's on top of the fact that they're planning to have even more of these free shuttles, for reasons I'll discuss in a moment. Come on. It's getting really frustrating here. And of course, this has been very successful. We're actually right now on shuttle number 9. First quarter 2023 is MPW9. And so far, for all the 8 that came before it, 360 projects have been taped out. 2 shuttles, so 80 projects total, have been successfully delivered, and it's all 100% open source. That's actually a requirement. If you want to get on the free shuttle, the one catch is your project has to be open source, and it has to be licensed in a way that other people can use your work. With proper credit, of course. The go-to license they use is Apache 2. It's pretty much guaranteed to make sure there's no issues. And yeah, this was a success. I mean, as I said, they shipped 2 shuttles. They call them MPW, short for multi-project wafer in this case. MPW1 shipped about a year ago. Unfortunately, it was broken. A lot of people actually received chips that were dead on arrival. But there were also some that walked just a little bit. It turns out there was a lot wrong in the architecture they used for this. But that's kind of to be expected. Like, these were the first chips ever manufactured using an open source PDK and using only open source tools. I like to compare this to a rocket launch. Whenever a new launch vehicle is designed, they put it on the pad and you launch it, and it's considered mission success if the thing doesn't blow up on the launch pad already. So in that sense, MPW1 was also pretty successful in the sense that it worked at all. MPW2 actually was massively delayed because of the issues found in MPW1. You had to go back and fix those and resubmit a bunch of orders to the fab. And so MPW2 shipped just a couple weeks ago, over a year late, and it was also broken, but less. It turns out that previously people couldn't even access their designs on the chip because stuff in the framework surrounding it was broken. But now people can access their designs in the silicon that they just got. But it turns out that there's some timing issues going on with inter-macro communication. It's like a whole deal. It turns out that they're still very much figuring out with having their open source design rule checkers actually find all of the issues. But a lot of people also received working chips. It's pretty much just a minority of things that were broken. And so really every shuttle is one more issue fixed. And there really is like a massive focus on having the community involved in this, because I like to go into the open source Slack, open source Silicon Slack, and seeing eFabless people directly talk to community members who have gotten their chips and going through and figuring out all the issues from the chips people got. It's really quite a community involved process of debugging these, improving these things. There's of course high hopes for MPW9. They've had a whole bunch of time to fix issues. 3 through 7 were also delayed because of needing to fix issues, but it looks like everything's pretty much ironed out now to the point where people should be able to at least be able to access their designs and use them. And yeah, so what did people actually get? And I tried to put this next part into the presentation, but it broke. Like, it just said no. So I'm gonna quickly Alt-tab over into my file browser here. I'm gonna open this. So this is somebody who got their chips back just a couple weeks ago, and they submitted a FPGA fabric, and you can see it happily blinking some LEDs. So this is one of the first instances of people successfully getting back working silicon for free from East Fabless, built using only open source tools, using an open source PDK, and also in itself being an open source project. And kind of see the chip on there, it's on the whiteboard. They deliver this entire like massive blackboard with all of the components you need to bring up your chip and test it. So let me get back to the presentation. Okay, so, and of course, what do you do when you get one of those, one-of-a-kind chips back from the fab as somebody who participated? Well, you dump it in a flask of sulfuric acid, of course. Somebody did this, and they decapped the chip because they really wanted to take a look at what was underneath. Unfortunately, most of it is hidden by the metal 5 layer fill, so they just fill the topmost layer out, I guess for performance reasons, power grid performance reasons, and then, but you kind of have to etch away the top layers so you see the open source goodness underneath, and it's really quite amazing seeing this pop up on a microchip die shot. But what did people actually submit besides that FPGA fabric? So this is the part where I go over some notable submissions. So first things first, we have this one. It's called RISC-Duino, and it is sort of supposed to be a Arduino-compatible RISC-V platform. So it's based on a RISC-V CPU, but it has all the regular Arduino components. There's analog digital converters, there's GPIO, timers, real-time clock. Basically, this thing has the same I/O capabilities as an Arduino, but it has a RISC-V CPU inside it. This is another RISC-V submissions. It turns out that RISC-V, for being a completely open source processor design, is really popular for these submissions. So somebody decided they wanted as much performance as they could get, and they made this out-of-order execution RISC-V processor, which ends up only taking up this tiny little space in the middle. The 4 things at the top, that's actually a RAM. That is Open RAM, generated RAM. So there's a thing called Open RAM, which lets you generate SRAM blocks of arbitrary size, and it's also open source. So got that open source RAM at the top. That's 8 kilobytes, which is also quite incredible. These things, you have a fully open source processor design on a fully open source silicon chip. This next one is one of the analog submissions, which are becoming more and more important, because even though the workflow for making digital chips has been mostly perfected, analog is still, there's a lot of things still to develop in analog for these chips. And so this, somebody made this is a RISC-V 64-bit processor on there. But it also has at the top a 5 gigahertz transceiver, so it can actually radio out of the chip. And I don't know why they put so much RAM on that. It's at least 20 kilobytes of RAM. It's kind of weird. And of course, they put some silicon art on there as well, because you can do that. Why not? This one's quite interesting. This is also one of the analog submissions. It's only a couple of transistors large, so we're seeing the actual layout as it's been drawn in one of the layout editors, and it's going to get one-to-one manufactured onto the chip. This is a singular neural network neuron, but it's completely implemented using analog circuitry, using MOSFETs, kind of doing analog computing in order to figure out the state of this neural network neuron. Of course, it's very small. It's only a couple transistors, so you can copy-paste this probably a million times. This one I didn't find any die shot images of, but the concept was very intriguing. Somebody thought that they could make a DNA sequencer on a chip, basically not really making an integrated circuit as much as abusing the fact that silicon fabs can produce these very fine structures, very small structures with very fine detail, to kind of build what's almost a sort of nano machine and sequences DNA, I guess. And of course, it has all the processing capabilities. It also has all of the processing capabilities on board for analyzing the results. They call it a genetic processing unit, I think. And of course, only the most important submissions of them all is the 2 that I've made. So on the left there, you have design that's taped out to the Global Foundries shuttle. I'll talk about that in a moment. It's a simple 8-bit microprocessor design. Usually you wouldn't submit something this simple, but this was an experimental tape out, so they kind of just asked for simple designs. And on the right is what I like to call the AS6581, and it is a re-implementation of the Commodore SID, except copy-pasted 8 times. So that will be interesting when that comes back. This is also a type of submission that you actually see quite a bit now. This is a multi-project submissions. So on here you can actually see not one, but you see like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9, 8 or 9 individual designs. And so what these people did is they each made their own little design and they slapped it all onto one chip. So you have this multi-project design being taped out on a multi-project wafer. So it's like Inception almost. It's actually very cost effective because you can split the cost even more. This is kind of the idea behind this one. This is tiny tape out, and this is 200 designs on a single chip. So obviously you get very little space per design, so you can only do like some very simple circuits. But you get 200 of them. And the way this works is that there is some address lines on the chip that select which one of these is active, and then the active one gets control over the rest of the I/O pins. And the reason this one exists is to just make it even more accessible. Yeah, so 200 designs on one chip. Because I've actually contributed to this one, and this is how I got started. If you look on the left there. Actually, I can't point to any one of them, but there's 6 designs on there that I have made. Because it's just a very simple way to get started. Because I say no Linux required. It's kind of jokingly, but it's true. They use web-based tools, so you don't need to install all of the Linux utilities that you need to actually build these chips yourself. You can just go online, and you can use their web-based editor to make your chips. So I've really gone from absolutely nothing to, hey, there's this website where you can go design your own chip and actually get it made, which I think is one of the most exciting things that has happened in recent years. And it's the easiest way to get involved. I dropped the D there, so it's involved now. It's the easiest way to get involved. Yeah, so, and of course, I say it a little bit biased because I helped contribute to Tiny Tape Out. I wrote a few guides for them, made that Discord bot, I guess. Yeah, so what's next? So what's the future like? Well, more foundries are actually jumping on board of this. It turns out that it's not just Skywater doing this now. Global Foundries hopped on board. They also open sourced one of their PDK. They open sourced their 180 nanometer process, which is going to be the budget process. So it's going to be cheaper than the 130 nanometer one. So we are actually going to see price drops even from that $10K dollars from earlier. And they also did a free shuttle for Global Foundries. That's what I mean when I say we'll have more free shuttles soon. And Skywater is also thinking of open sourcing their 90 nanometer process development kits. They're also thinking of open sourcing some of the additional features like the radiation hardening and the cryo chips. And we also got IHP, which is a fab right here in Germany. They also have a 180 nanometer process, but it's optimized for analog, particularly radio applications. So we get some more application-specific stuff in here as well. And of course, we're getting more free shuttles. As I said, with these multiple fabs coming aboard, you can run multiple shuttles in parallel. And in fact, that's what happened last quarter. During December, they had 2 shuttles open simultaneously. The regular one for Skywater 130 nanometers and Global Foundries one for 180 nanometers, which is the very first full tape out that I ever did. The very first full submissions that I ever did was that 8-bit microprocessor. It's probably not going to work. They did say there's likely going to be severe problems with the first few tape outs from that as well. That's all part of the fun, in a way. And of course, lower the price, as I said, probably even more. In fabs haven't even begun to think about streamlining their processes to accept many customers simultaneously. And just go to community. There's already quite a sizable community around making these open source chips, like to the point where I can go online, like go ask in a chat, hey, I have this issue, and immediately have people responding to me and helping me. And to the point where the community is developing their own tools. There is open source tools available that were made by the community to help out. And of course, all of this just equals a really big success for Google, because never in history have so many people voluntarily trained themselves to become hardware engineers. So, of course, the price drops are pretty good too, pretty profitable. But it also benefits everyone else. So I think this is pretty okay. So before I say anything more, I want to give a big thanks to Matt Venn. He's the organizer of Tiny Tapeout, but he's also pretty much the public figure of open source silicon. He's done so much work, especially with educating more people that this exists. And he was also very, very patient with answering my questions as I was developing this and part 2 of this presentation. So if you want to get involved, the easiest way is to go to tinytapeout.com. I'll leave that on screen for a bit, which is that project where you can get one of your small designs taped out. It's specifically designed for you to make simple stuff. Like the very first design I made on there was a thing that just scrolls some text on an LCD. So if you wanna get your first experience with making your own silicon and potentially even get your first custom chip, you should definitely get started there. Tiny Tapeout 3 is running right now. They're open for submissions right now. They will be for the rest of the month. Tablets.com, of course, is one of my sources for most of this information. This is the link to the open source silicon Slack. So if you're looking for more guides to getting started, or just go in there and just ask. Just go in there and ask, hey, how can I contribute to this? How can I get started? Somebody will help you out. And of course, stick around for part 2 of this presentation. This was supposed to be more of an overview of the entire open source silicon movement as a whole. But during part 2, I intend to go into a little bit detail about how the PDK works, how semiconductors work, and then at the very end of part 2, I'm actually going to show how to make your first chip design easily, because it really is dead easy. They really managed to streamline the process a lot, and in fact I will be live demoing building a complete chip design at the end of part 2, so definitely don't miss that if you're interested at all. And yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. However, a little bit of news came in towards the end while I was making this. It looks like there is going to be plans about having more free shuttles, so they're going to double it from 4 per year to 8 per year. And they've also finally fixed some of the high-level timing issues that plagued the early ones. So hopefully this year, open source silicon will be back better than ever. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening, and if anybody has any questions, now's the time, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So, does anyone have any questions?
Hard to apply when we got.
Yeah, you can pass around the microphone.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'll pass the microphone if anyone.
I guess not.
I mean, you have a question?
I have a question. Yes. So, if you order your chip for $10,000 and it just arrives dead, do you just lose the money? Like, what happens then?
If it arrives dead?
Yeah, like you said, the early designs just arrived dead, and like, what happens then?
Can you give me the microphone back, please?
Need 2 mics.
This is basically what the first few free shuttles were about. They didn't want to risk paid designs getting destroyed, so they mostly did that for the with the free shuttles first. But yes, when they discovered the issues with the first 2 shuttles, they did actually completely cancel their fab order for the paid ones and start over. So hopefully those people will not be getting broken chips. But yes, there is kind of a little bit of a risk involved right now. But it is also a risk on your side, because if you fuck up at all in making your design, nobody can help you anyway. So that's actually not too bad, not too unlikely. And the very first tape out I did, that 8-bit microprocessor, it has a bug, which is really frustrating because there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. Indirect addressed branch instruction are just going to glitch out, and like I can't exactly call up the fab and tell them, hey, can you update my design real quick? I found a bug. So yeah, it's very risky to begin with, and I think that's what a lot of people making silicon are expecting in the first place.
I mean, I have a question. I mean, maybe you'll talk about this on the next presentation. Not sure, but this hardware design. I mean, at least it seems like the way I see it. It seems like it's quite low level in design. Similarly, how you would like to like assembly language or something. Like, is that correct, or are people like developing kind of the equivalent of higher level languages like whatever Python or something? For like designing hardware, so like you sort of think in like more abstract components, and like it's kind of compiled down to smaller things. Or
yes, basically, I will go over this in the next presentation talking about the Verilog, but there is some high-level components that you can use. Somebody even made a hardware description language in Python, so you can use Python to define your hardware if you really want to. I mean, there's also some other ways to do it, like I myself, when I made those tiny tape-out submissions, the first 3 that I didn't know Verilog yet, so I used Logisim Evolution, and those designs ended up simulating good. So we also now live in a timeline where you can use Logisim Evolution to design actual physical chips. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of high-level options available.
cool. Anyone else have any questions? No. Then we can just give another round of applause for Tholin. Thank you.
Also, you can.
So,
Thank you. And you can always come up to me and DM me if you're interested, if you have any more questions or you're interested in participating or contributing. I'm willing to help. Okay.
yeah, and don't forget about next week. It will be on Friday at the same time, like the second part of the presentation, where he will be actually telling us how to build a chip, which I think it's very cool. Actually, I found this like really exciting. So yeah, and again, thank you everyone for coming. So
Nice.
actually, if you all wanna come here, we can like take a group picture, because I don't know, I think that's kind of cute
Sure.
or something.
Nice. My swing. My swing.
Come on, yeah, kitty.
My swing. My swing.
Is this a group photo?
I second what
the
motion.
That can be my sweetie.
I'm just gonna be comfy like this.
Where do
I
I
need
go?
to sit. My legs are just hurting.
Just sit
There's a
down.
mark.
Actually, you want to take the group picture, Carlos, or I should do it?
I can do it.
I could do it. I'm a real photographer. Oh, he's got it. Okay.
Okay.
XFCE terminal, my bad.
Stand by. Here we go.
I can't need to find my controller.
On the bedroom.
Okay, got the microphone inside of your face, Tholin.
Oh yeah, it's in front of Tholin. Yes.
Here we go.
Oh. Let me move my tail.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Don't turn around. Don't turn around. There's a two. There's a hidden two on the screen now.
Evil.
Oh my god.
Well, that includes you,
What a
so...
troll.
Boom.
Yeah.
Marvel's still friends.
Jim, why don't you use Photoshop? Why use Jim? Look at this.
Oh no, there's a Getty.
I'm exhausted now.
Oh, that was very interesting.
I hear you double.
And nice. So
I liked your presentation. Bye.
I messed up a couple times actually.
Oh
no.
James'
watching
first
YouTube.
presentation hasn't.
I think like hashtag me being here for